Pollen.com is a company that provides pollen data in some parts of the US. So if you're allergic and some days are worse than others, you can actually get directions that take you on paths that have very low pollen counts. So you get to work and you're more productive than you would be if you just ignore that. It might apply in some places that are dry. It may not apply in Chennai. But the beauty of having cars as platforms is that the local users, the local developers, become creators of value. So if it's not relevant in Chennai, this will not be created here. No one will use it. If it's really relevant, someone will find a way to do it. And what we're doing is creating platforms, but also giving toolkits from the standpoint of being able to get third-party developers to work and do things with those toolkits. So these are, again, this is what I said about WellDoc. These are sort of examples of how the car might interact with you through simple conversations. There's peace of mind obviously associated with this. It's not just you, the driver, but the passenger, the young, important passenger in the back who's dozing off and maybe dozing off because of hyperglycemia can in fact get an alert through the sound system and alert the mother or father driving, if that's the case. Or in the case where the driver is driving, that alert can also go through. So there's various ways by which cars can start doing good. This is sort of, I'm trying to give examples of the wellness applications. But I think the key point here is it's time for us to start looking at new ways to work together. We already are doing it in many ways, but I really encourage and offer an open invitation to look at how we can all work together. It's us coming together to be able to make that difference. This is an example that was done a couple of years ago with students at the University of Michigan. We gave them toolkits, they modified cars. It so happens that in the United States, students drive cars, so it's easy to give cars to students to modify it. And then they drove off to across the country from Michigan, which is sort of in the central part of the United States, not central part, out to the West Coast. Obviously, students being students, they went west from Ann Arbor, Michigan, to Northwestern University in Chicago, Evanston, a city near Chicago. Then they went to CU, which is the University of Colorado at Boulder in Colorado, and then they went off to Stanford in California. So, but the point was, every car was a provider of data. Data was getting mashed up in very interesting ways. Students being the drivers, they had created a police alert application. So if one of the cars saw a police officer, they pressed a button and all the other cars really went to exactly the speed limit. And so they were really at the end of the journey when they did get a ticket. The lead car was going close to 80 miles an hour. But the police officer was really surprised that the other three cars going by were going exactly at 55 miles an hour. And so I think they got a discount on their ticket. But nevertheless, I think the point was that there was a lot of creation and of learning, if you will, by undergraduate students, mostly in that experiment. So we're going ahead. We're sort of creating toolkits. And I'll sort of stop with this comment that really I think our coming together is most important. And we look at ways of being able to repurpose cars and their value proposition by working together. So we've just announced in Mumbai a couple of days ago the availability of toolkits. It goes by the name OpenXC, so you can Google that and you get all the specifications for how to modify to really create applications for cars and potentially even modify the functionality of cars, obviously in a protected manner. So with that, thank you very much and appreciate your attention. Oh, let me come on.
Chennai and Gujarat are becoming hubs of manufacturing of automobiles these days. I mean, what is the potential and scope for India to become design hubs, especially at advanced research?
So what's the possibility for India to become a hub?
A design.
Oh yeah,
not just manufacturing.
There's manufacturing happening now. Obviously, manufacturing calls for all kinds of efficiencies. There's investment happening around that. At the end of the day, no single firm can really thrive with just efficiencies alone. We can keep getting better and better and faster and faster at doing the same thing. So the same thing may be irrelevant. And so as we look for change and look for different things that needs to be done, the difference really needs to be coming from the local better than the local calendar year. Mind that. So it's just a matter of time. And if you have needs, suggestions, wants, ideas to make that happen faster, let me know.
Spending so much for research and all that, there is a need which I think is needed, which is not being presently addressed. When you make a turn in a car, you use a turn signal, left turn, right turn. But there is no method to distinguish whether the car is making a turn or a U-turn.
Yeah.
Because this information is needed by the car behind. Because when the car in front of you makes a U-turn, then the car in front slows down considerably, and it's a kind of irritation for this. Would be a great source of information.
Yeah.
Can you mention your opinion or comments on this?
Yeah, so just to understand it right, are you saying that it would be very, I mean, I agree with you that the car behind would, I do agree with you that the car behind would benefit a lot by knowing that the car in front is in fact going to make a U-turn as opposed to just a simple right turn, if you will, right? But of course, that is almost predictive information, and so it's hard to sort of to predict that until the actual U-turn begins. But there's clearly a lot of historical information, so maybe there's a high probability that at certain points where people turn, more people than not make a U-turn, right? And so that's kind of predictive information that could be brought in, and so that's some kind of a way of sort of creating an alert that this is not going to be the normal right turn because 6 out of 10 cars here tend to make a U-turn. So I think there's a lot of predictive technologies at work, but whether you want to have a third indicator that says here's a left turn, right turn, but here's a U-turn, that's a different kind of you're then adding a task to the driver, and that may not necessarily be accepted by the driver, right? So I think there's predictive mechanisms, a lot of predictive work that's happening in the design of automobiles, in fact just behavior, driver behavior. And this has to do with preemptive braking, and those lights that you saw there are in fact an indicator that the car in front of you is much slower than you are. So we can do that kind of early warning indications that assist the driver. But I do agree with you. I mean, I think it's a valid point. And if you have an idea, we can give you the toolkits that you can experiment with. I think that's the way. So one point is that in a lot of the innovation that you are going to see in the future is clearly not necessarily going to be the exclusive realm of the manufacturer. The external community of users, developers, are not just coming to us will not be coming with just ideas. So ideas are a fabulous starting point, but as the toolkits for innovation and the barriers for innovation decrease and the toolkits for innovation become more affordable, you will find that solutions will start coming from the outside world. In my backpack here, I have a Android application book. It sort of shows just a page full of applications, Android apps, none of which were thought of by the people who created Android. They created the platform and made it available. Maybe 1 or 2 of them were thought of by Android, not even that, the creators. Everything else came from the community. So I think you're going to see that kind of phenomenon. But of course, we have to bear in mind that cars can do bad things really quickly because they travel at 60 kilometers, 100 kilometers an hour. And so we have to make sure that the usability of the automobile doesn't distract the driver from the primary function of getting to your destination and back safely. And so design and usability, safety, security, privacy are all integral elements of that design process. Thank you. Yeah. Maybe a microphone would be good. Yeah.
No, it's fine.
Oh, it's fine. But is this being recorded? I'm not sure if somebody else could benefit from that.
You haven't mentioned majority of the cars involved are becoming, electronics and the intelligence to the machine, adding intelligence to the machine. In context of affordability, meaning access to people in India or other developing countries, which could really be the chunk of the population contributing to the next billion.
Right.
So, I mean, how can these expensive, say, electronics or AI or other app tools be made available to these next billion? If the next billion or a chunk of it is not willing to pay for it, I mean, it's again the same set of old 1 billion being sold off again, right? Like, how do you tackle the issues?
I think the question is a very valid one. The answer will not be found in the West. It will not be found in a remote place? The answer will be found right here on the streets of Chennai or the streets of Calcutta or the streets of Mumbai or the streets of Delhi. What can be provided for by the West or the world in general are best practices, are toolkits, technologies, platforms as starting points. Imagine a swimming pool with a great lane. The lanes are open in front of you right now. What you have are beautiful launch pads, diving pads, right? So use those pads and get off and go. But the lanes are open. The lanes are for you to go race on, if you will. And I don't think it's really prudent to wait for a solution to drop, right? Because it'll always come top down then. You'll always get a solution that'll trickle down here and say, well, maybe you can use it too. I think the only sustainable solution will be one that's really driven by the market where the needs are most felt.
So, I have a question about your second point that you were mentioning in the title.
Yeah.
Are there examples of this, any city governments or state governments trying to make use of these platforms for collecting data or that kind of and use your toolkit giving enough support for that right now?
The toolkit gives support to get very basic data from the automobiles in a pure read-alone fashion, and then make it available for any other system that might want to utilize it. So, in a very specific, as a very specific example, if your wiper blade in fact moves, that piece of information can be relayed to the toolkit and then conveyed either through your phone or through a dedicated SIM card in your car, and then sent off to a cloud. The cloud can aggregate it and pass information to the back. That's one example. Another example has to do with parking lots. So it might be, maybe there's no organized parking lot structure here, but I'm an entrepreneur and I have 10 parking lots in Mount Road, in the most congested area. I want to offer it up. And at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, I offer the fact that I have these 10 lots. And being a business person, I'm going to bid. I'm going to allow a bidding process that then dictates some kind of a really convenient way for you to come and find a spot under a tree and pick it up later, you see. Maybe it's irrelevant. If it's irrelevant, the application will never develop. But if it is relevant, it's possible now to essentially make that information available, have a third party offer the capacity and create the matchup. Of course, what it means is that you, as an individual, you got a parking spot that you know you can go to. But as a member of society, you know that you're not adding to congestion, looking around for parking, wasting fuel, and maybe backing up and making those U-turns, if you will. Maybe you want an algorithm that says, especially as you go towards the second billion, where they're going to be networked. And you can now start, in some sense, demanding efficiencies. You can say, I want to make no right turns on my way home. And maybe it's a little longer, but it's actually more efficient because you're not waiting to make this right turn.
Anyway, it's a very interesting aspect indeed. I think, but we also need policy support from and directives from the governments too, because see, so far automobiles are being thought of as personal things.
Yeah.
And then if they have to become sources of data that can be sourced by the local government, I think this has to be built in.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I think it's you always
Right.
need the planners to be part. Incentives are great. So if you get a tax percentage off on your income
Yes,
tax,
I think that we
because
can
you're contributing
definitely
to data.
incentivize
Right.
that. And
of
then
petrol is going to
make
be
that-
less. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So
Right.
so we'd love to hear more. And in fact, we'd love to hear more about how we can participate, even in a cause right here in the city. We were at a meeting yesterday with Jay and others, our colleagues, really about trying to help with city planning. I think that the time is really right. I mean, it's fascinating to be here in Chennai to see change happening right here. Things that maybe took place 50 or 100 years ago elsewhere, but here you are sitting at this point of change, whether it's here, whether it's in Ahmednagar, or whether it's in Ahmedabad, or whether it's in Mumbai, or whether it's in Kolkata, or whether it's in Gurgaon, Okhla. I mean, these changes are happening right now in sort of the primary, secondary, tertiary cities all around. So I think this is the time to start working on these aspects.